In the relentless heart of the city, where dreams are as common as discarded coffee cups, a young waitress named Scarlett O'Connell was drowning in debt, in worry for her sick mother, and in the crushing anonymity of her daily grind. Her only lifeline was the quiet kindness she offered to a forgotten old man, a regular at her diner with a gnarled hand, and eyes that held the ghosts of 1,000 untold stories. She thought her compassion was a thank you to the universe, a silent prayer for a miracle. She never imagined the miracle would be sitting in her section disguised in worn-out tweed, holding the power to change everything. This isn't just a story of kindness rewarded. It's the story of how a simple act of humanity can unravel a web of secrets, expose the true nature of greed, and redefine a life in the most spectacularly unexpected way. Scarlett O'Connell knew the precise geography of exhaustion. It resided in the ache between her shoulder blades, a constant, dull throb that radiated down her arms and into her fingertips. It lived in the gritty feeling behind her eyelids as she jolted awake to the shrill cry of her 500 a.m. alarm, long before the sun even considered gracing the smog-tinged skyline of New York City. At 24, she felt ancient, worn down by a life that seemed to take far more than it ever gave. Her world was a cramped fourth-floor walk-up in Queens, a space she shared with her mother, Eleanor. The apartment was a collection of mismatched furniture, faded photographs, and the ever-present cloying scent of rubbing alcohol and wilting flowers. Eleanor, once a vibrant force of nature, with a laugh that could fill a room, was now a fragile silhouette against the window. Her world shrunk by the unforgiving grip of multiple sclerosis. The disease was a cruel thief, stealing her mobility, her independence, and on the bad days, her hope. Every morning, Scarlett's routine was a meticulously choreographed ballet of care. She would help her mother wash, dress, and eat, her movements gentle yet efficient. She'd measure out the daunting cocktail of medications, each pill a tiny bitter reminder of their mounting medical bills. The bills were a relentless tide threatening to pull them under. They were tacked to the refrigerator, a mosaic of final notices and stark red warnings. Scarlett worked double shifts at the Daily Grind, a bustling, perpetually sticky diner in Midtown, but her paychecks were mere sandbags against a flood. The diner was its own special kind of purgatory. The air was thick with the smell of sizzling bacon-burnt coffee and the simmering frustrations of its patrons. Her boss, a perpetually stressed man named Sal, barked orders like a drill sergeant, his patience as thin as the diner's cheap napkins. Her colleagues were a mixed bag. There was Brenda, a veteran waitress with a heart of gold and feet that were permanently swollen. And then there was Tiffany, a woman whose ambition was as sharp and dangerous as her perfectly manicured nails. Tiffany viewed Scarlett with a mixture of pity and disdain, often making snide remarks about her worn-out sneakers, or the fact that she never joined them for after-work drinks. "Some of us have lives, you know," she'd say loud enough for Scarlett to hear. Scarlett's life was her mother. Every spare dollar, every waking thought was dedicated to Eleanor's well-being. She dreamed of a world beyond the greasy spoons and prescription refills. She dreamed of taking her mother to see the ocean again, of feeling the sun on her face without the gnawing anxiety of the next bill. But dreams felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. It was on a bleak Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day that seemed to suck the color out of the city, that he first came in. The man was old, ancient even. He moved with a painful slowness, his left leg dragging slightly behind him, his left hand gnarled and trembling, clutching a worn wooden cane. He was dressed in clothes that had seen better decades. A faded tweed jacket with patched elbows, trousers that were a little too short, and scuffed leather shoes. His face was a road map of wrinkles, his eyes a pale, watery blue that seemed to look at the world with a profound weariness. He chose a small booth in the back, a section no one ever wanted, because it was farthest from the kitchen. Tiffany, who was supposed to take it, rolled her eyes dramatically. Ugh, not him again. He takes forever to order and tips like he's on a fixed income from the Stone Age. Scarlett, you take him. You're so good with the charity cases. Scarlett's jaw tightened at the insult, but she simply nodded, grabbing a menu and a glass of water. It's no problem, she said, her voice even. She approached the booth with a gentle smile. Hello, sir. Welcome to the Daily Grind. My name is Scarlett. Can I start you off with a coffee? The old man looked up. His gaze surprisingly sharp. He seemed to study her for a long moment, before nodding slowly. Coffee would be nice, young lady. Black. His voice was a low, gravelly rasp, as if it hadn't been used much that day. When she returned with the coffee, he was staring out the window, a look of profound loneliness on his face. She placed the mug down carefully, making sure the handle was facing his good right hand. He noticed the small gesture, his eyes flickering towards her. Thank you, he murmured. He ordered the daily special. Meatloaf with mashed potatoes and gravy. It was the cheapest thing on the menu. As she took his order, she saw that the tremor in his left hand was quite severe, making it difficult for him to hold the menu steady. Throughout his meal, Scarlett kept a discreet eye on him. She noticed how he struggled to cut his meatloaf with one hand. Other waitresses might have ignored it, eager to turn the table over quickly. But Scarlett couldn't. It reminded her too much of the countless times she'd had to help her mother with similar simple tasks that had become monumental challenges. Taking a deep breath, she walked back to his table. Sir, she said softly, would you mind if I... She gestured towards his plate. He looked up, a flicker of surprise and something else, suspicion, in his eyes. He seemed about to refuse, a proud set to his jaw. It's just... Scarlett continued, her voice gentle. I help my mother with her meals sometimes. She has a bit of a tremor, too. I know it can be frustrating. The tension in his shoulders seemed to ease slightly. He looked at her, truly looked at her, and for the first time she saw a glimmer of something beyond weariness in his pale blue eyes. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. With quiet efficiency, Scarlett took his knife and fork and quickly cut his meatloaf into small, manageable bites. She did it without fuss, without drawing attention to them, her movements practiced and sure. When she was done, she placed the fork back in his good hand. There you go, she said with a warm smile. Enjoy your meal. He didn't say thank you. He just stared at his plate, then back up at her, a complex, unreadable expression on his face. Scarlett returned to her duties, a strange feeling settling in her chest. She hadn't done it for a bigger tip. She hadn't even thought about it. She had done it because it felt like the right human thing to do. He finished his meal, paid the exact amount in hash, and left a $1 bill as a tip. Tiffany, who had been watching from across the diner, let out a derisive snort. See all that extra effort for a buck? You're wasting your time, Scarlett. Scarlett just shrugged, pocketing the $1. It wasn't about the money. For a fleeting moment in the eyes of a lonely old man, she had seen a flicker of recognition, a silent acknowledgement of her small act of kindness. And in her world of constant struggle that felt like a victory, she didn't know it then, but that $1 and the simple act that had earned it was the first domino to fall in a chain of events that would shatter her world and rebuild it in a way she could never have imagined. The old man became a fixture in the back booth of the daily grind. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. He always ordered the daily special, always drank his coffee black, and always sat in Scarlett's section. The other waitresses were more than happy to let her have him. They nicknamed him Old Man Hemlock, a morbid joke about his age and slow pace. Scarlett never used the name. To her, he was Mr. Harrison. He'd told her his name on his third visit, a quiet utterance she had to lean in to hear. Arthur Harrison. Their interactions were brief islands of quiet in the noisy sea of the diner. Scarlett learned his routine. He liked his coffee refilled precisely twice. He preferred his mashed potatoes with extra gravy. He always read a tattered paperback novel, the cover so worn she could never make out the title. And he always struggled with his left hand. Scarlett continued to help him cutting his food without being asked, a silent, understood ritual between them. She'd bring him an extra napkin to tuck into his collar, anticipating the occasional tremor-induced spill. She started bringing him a glass of water with a straw, a small trick she'd learned with her mother. He never explicitly thanked her for these things, but his gratitude was there in the way his shoulders would relax when she approached, in the softening of his weary eyes. One rainy Thursday, the diner was unusually slow. Mr. Harrison was nursing his coffee, staring at the rain-streaked window. Scarlett, finding a rare moment of respite, approached his table. "It's really coming down out there," she said, more to break the silence than anything else. He turned his gaze from the window to her. "It is," he rasped. "Days like this make the bones ache." "I know what you mean," Scarlett said, a genuine note of empathy in her voice. "My mother always has a tough time when the weather turns." A flicker of interest in his eyes. "Your mother?" "Yes, she has MS. It's difficult for her to get around." The words came out before she could stop them, a rare crack in the carefully constructed wall she built around her personal life at work. Mr. Harrison was silent for a long moment, his gaze intense. That must be a heavy burden for a young woman to carry. Scarlett felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't used to such direct, unpitying acknowledgement of her reality. She just offered a small, watery smile. "We manage. She's a fighter. And you?" he asked, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "Are you a fighter, Scarlett?" The question caught her off guard. She looked at her own hands, calloused and chapped from work. She thought of the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the dreams she'd packed away like old clothes. "I have to be," she whispered. From that day on, their conversations, though still brief, deepened. He would ask about her mother, remembering small details she'd shared. She learned that he lived alone, that he enjoyed classical music, and that he missed his wife who had passed away many years ago. He spoke of her with a profound, aching sadness that resonated with Scarlett's own fears for her mother. Meanwhile, the pressures of Scarlett's life were mounting. A notice arrived from the insurance company, a stark clinical letter informing them that a new experimental treatment that had given Eleanor a glimmer of hope was not covered. The cost was astronomical, a figure so large Scarlett couldn't even comprehend it. It felt like a death sentence to her mother's chances of reclaiming any semblance of a normal life. That night, she broke down sobbing in the cramped bathroom of their apartment, the sound muffled by a towel so her mother wouldn't hear. The weight of it all was suffocating. She felt like she was failing the one person she loved most in the world. The next day at the diner, she was a ghost of herself. Her smile was brittle, her movements mechanical. Even Brenda, the kind-hearted waitress, noticed. "You okay, honey? You look like you've seen a ghost." Scarlett just nodded, unable to find the words. Tiffany, of course, was less charitable. Rough night. Maybe you should try getting some sleep instead of whatever it is you do. Scarlett ignored her, her focus solely on getting through the shift. When Mr. Harrison came in, he took one look at her face, and his own expression clouded with concern. "You are not well, Scarlett," he stated, his voice low and firm. "I'm fine." She lied, her voice trembling. He simply shook his head slowly. "No, you are not." He ate his meal in silence, but his gaze followed her as she moved through the diner, a silent, watchful presence. When he was ready to leave, he did something he'd never done before. As he stood up, he placed his good hand on her arm, his touch surprisingly firm. "Courage," he rasped, his pale blue eyes locking with hers. "Sometimes the darkest hour is just before the dawn." He then left, leaving his usual meager tip on the table. But his words and the unexpected gesture of comfort stayed with Scarlett long after he was gone. They were a small, flickering candle in the overwhelming darkness of her despair. The situation at home grew more dire. Eleanor had a bad fall, and the doctor insisted she needed a specialized medical bed to prevent pressure sores and further injury. The cost was another insurmountable mountain. Scarlett started looking for a second job, her desperation a frantic, clawing thing. She was running on fumes, a volatile cocktail of caffeine, adrenaline, and sheer willpower. One afternoon, Tiffany was in a particularly foul mood. A customer had complained about his steak, and Sal had taken it out on the entire staff. As Scarlett was clearing a table, Tiffany cornered her by the busing station. "You know I don't get you." Tiffany sneered, her voice dripping with venom. "You spend all this time coddling that old man. For what $1 tip you could be charming the businessmen at table 5, the ones who actually have money. But no, you're playing nursemaid to some broke old fossil." "It's not about the money, Tiffany," Scarlett said, her voice weary. "Oh, please." Tiffany scoffed. "Everything is about the money. Look at you. Your shoes are falling apart. You probably live in some dump in a bad neighborhood. Don't you want more for yourself?" "What I want," Scarlett said, her voice low and dangerous, her own exhaustion and fear finally bubbling to the surface, "is for you to mind your own business." The confrontation left a bitter taste in her mouth. But Tiffany's words, cruel as they were, had struck a nerve. Was she a fool? Was her compassion a weakness in a world that only valued strength and wealth? The following Thursday, Mr. Harrison came in as usual. He seemed quieter than normal, a thoughtful, almost somber air about him. Scarlett served him his meal, the familiar ritual, a small comfort in her chaotic world. As she was refilling his coffee, her hand trembled, and a small amount of coffee sloshed onto the saucer. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her nerves frayed. "Scarlett," he said, his voice cutting through her apology. He looked not at the spilled coffee, but at her hand. "You're wearing yourself to the bone." Tears welled in Scarlett's eyes, hot and sudden. She couldn't stop them. She turned away, mortified to be crying in the middle of the diner. It's everything," she choked out her back to him. "My mum, the bed, the insurance. I don't know what to do." She expected him to say something comforting, something like, "It will be okay." But he was silent. After a long moment, she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. She turned, wiping her eyes, to see Mr. Harrison holding out a napkin. He didn't leave right away that day. He sat for an extra hour, nursing his cold coffee, his gaze fixed on her. He watched her deal with a rude customer, his jaw tight with what looked like anger on her behalf. He saw her force a smile for a family with screaming children. He watched her, and for the first time Scarlett felt like someone was truly seeing her. Not just the waitress, but the struggling young woman underneath. When he finally got up to leave, he stopped at her station. He pressed a folded piece of paper into her hand. "A man I know is looking for someone with your particular skills," he said, his voice a low rumble. "He is a good man. This is his address. Go and see him tomorrow morning. Tell him Arthur sent you." He then turned and walked out of the diner, leaving Scarlett staring at the piece of paper in her hand. It was a crisp, expensive-looking piece of cardstock, unlike anything she'd ever seen him with before. On it, in elegant, embossed script, was an address. An address in one of the most exclusive, wealthiest parts of the city, Park Avenue. She looked from the card to the door where he had disappeared. A whirlwind of confusion and a tiny, fragile spark of hope ignited within her. Who was this Mr. Harrison? And who on Park Avenue could possibly be waiting for a waitress from the daily grind? The address on the card felt like a foreign object in Scarlett's hand, a key to a world she had only ever glimpsed from the outside. 740 Park Avenue. She knew the building by reputation alone. It was a limestone fortress, a bastion of old money and staggering power, home to CEOs, titans of industry, and the kind of people whose lives were chronicled in the society pages, not in the margins of overdue bills. The idea of her Scarlett O'Connell from Queens presenting herself at its marbled entrance was ludicrous. All night she wrestled with the proposition. Was it some kind of mistake, a cruel joke, or worse, was the old man in his quiet loneliness simply confused? She imagined knocking on the door of some palatial penthouse, only to be met with a bewildered stare and a swift dismissal. The humiliation would be worse than the disappointment. But then she thought of her mother's pale, tired face. She thought of the letter from the insurance company, its cold, corporate language sealing their fate. She thought of the doctor's urgent recommendation for the medical bed. Desperation was a powerful motivator strong enough to override fear and doubt. What did she have to lose? Her pride that had been chipped away long ago by life's relentless hardships. The next morning, she put on her only good outfit, a simple black dress mended at the hem and a cardigan to hide the slight fraying at the cuffs. She stood before the imposing canopied entrance of 740 Park Avenue, feeling as small and out of place as a stray cat in a lion's den. The doorman, resplendent in a perfectly tailored uniform, eyed her with thinly veiled suspicion. "Can I help you?" he asked, his tone suggesting he very much doubted it. Scarlett's heart hammered against her ribs. She clutched the expensive cardstock in her hand. I'm here to see someone," she stammered. "Mr. Harrison sent me." She braced herself for laughter, for dismissal. The doorman's expression shifted just slightly. The suspicion was replaced by a flicker of deference. "Mr. Harrison," he repeated, his tone now respectful. "Of course, the penthouse. I'll let them know you're on your way up." Penthouse. The word echoed in the cavernous gilt and marble lobby as she was led to a private elevator. The elevator ascended with a silent, unnerving smoothness, the polished brass walls reflecting a distorted, wide-eyed version of herself. This couldn't be right. Old Man Hemlock, Mr. Harrison, the man who ate the cheapest special and tipped a $1 lived here. The elevator doors opened directly into a sprawling apartment that was less a home and more a palace in the sky. The ceilings soared 20 feet high at least. The windows were vast panes of glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of Central Park. The floors were polished Italian marble, partially covered by antique Persian rugs. The walls were adorned with what Scarlett, even with her untrained eye, recognized as genuine masterpieces, a Monet here, a Picasso there. The air itself seemed different, cleaner, imbued with the scent of old money and fresh flowers. A woman in a crisp grey uniform, her hair in a severe bun, greeted her. "Miss O'Connell, please come this way. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you." Mr. Blackwood. Not Mr. Harrison. The confusion intensified, a knot of anxiety tightening in Scarlett's stomach. She followed the woman down a long, art-filled hallway, her worn-out shoes silent on the plush carpet. They stopped before a set of massive dark wood doors. The woman knocked once, then opened them. "Miss O'Connell is here, sir." Scarlett stepped into a vast, sun-drenched library. Bookshelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with leather-bound volumes that looked as old as time. In the center of the room, seated behind a grand mahogany desk, was a man. He was not old and frail. He was perhaps in his early 60s, with a full head of silver hair, a tanned, handsome face, and eyes the exact shade of pale, watery blue she knew so well. He was dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. His posture was ramrod straight. And on the desk, resting beside a sleek, modern laptop, was a gnarled, trembling left hand. Her Mr. Harrison was not there. And yet he was. The man behind the desk looked at her, and the weary, guarded expression of the diner patron was gone. In its place was a look of sharp intelligence, of authority, of immense power. But the eyes were the same. The eyes held the same flicker of something she had seen across the booth at the daily grind. "Scarlett," he said, and the voice was not the gravelly rasp of Mr. Harrison. It was clear, resonant, and commanding. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down." Scarlett couldn't move. Her mind was reeling, trying to connect two impossibly different realities: the man in the worn tweed jacket and the man in the bespoke suit. The man who struggled to cut his meatloaf and the man who commanded this empire of an apartment. "Mr. Harrison," she whispered the name, sounding absurd in this setting. A faint smile touched the man's lips. "That is a name I have used. My name is Alexander Blackwood." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. "Please." Numbly, Scarlett sank into the supple leather chair. It probably cost more than her mother's medication for a year. "I imagine," Alexander Blackwood began, his gaze unwavering, "that you are somewhat confused. Confused doesn't even begin to cover it." Scarlett managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't understand. The diner, your clothes, your hand." He held up his left hand. The tremor was still there, an uncontrollable palsy. "This at least is real. A small stroke a few years ago. It left me with this constant reminder of my own mortality. It is, shall we say, a humbling affliction." He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. "My wife, Eleanor, the same name as your mother, a coincidence that did not escape my notice, passed away 5 years ago. After she was gone, I found myself surrounded by people, but utterly alone. Financial advisors, board members, friends. All of them wanted something from Alexander Blackwood, the billionaire. They saw the fortune, not the man. Their kindness was transactional. Their concern was a commodity." He paused, his gaze drifting towards the window and the park beyond. "I grew tired of it. I grew cynical. I started to wonder if genuine, unselfish kindness still existed in this world. So I created Arthur Harrison, a lonely old man with a disability and presumably very little money. A man nobody would have any reason to impress. I wanted to see how the world treated a man who had nothing to offer. Scarlett listened mesmerized and horrified. The past few months replayed in her mind. Her cutting his food, the extra napkins, the quiet conversations. It had all been a test. For months, he continued, his voice softer now. I went to dozens of diners, cafes, parks. I was ignored. I was treated with impatience, with pity, with contempt. I was an inconvenience, a ghost in the machine of the city. Tiffany at your diner. She is the rule, not the exception. His eyes met hers again, and the intensity in them made her breath catch. But you were different. From the very first day you treated me with a dignity I had not been shown by anyone. You didn't see a charity case. You saw a person. You helped me not for a bigger tip, because, as you well know, my tips were insulting, but because you are a fundamentally decent and compassionate human being. You cut my food because you understood frustration and helplessness. You spoke to me because you understood loneliness. Scarlett felt a blush creep up her neck. She had been observed, analyzed, judged, all without her knowledge. It felt like an intrusion, a violation. So it was all a lie? She asked, a note of anger creeping into her voice. A game. It began as an experiment, he corrected gently. But it became something more. Listening to you speak of your mother with such love and fierce devotion, watching you work so hard, carrying such a heavy burden with so much grace. You reminded me of my Eleanor. She had that same inner strength. You restored a part of my faith in humanity, Scarlett. He opened a drawer in his magnificent desk and pulled out a file. He slid it across the polished surface towards her. I had my people look into your situation, Scarlett. I hope you can forgive the intrusion, but I had to understand the full measure of the woman I was meeting. He gestured to the file. I know about your mother's illness. I know about the insurance company's refusal to cover her treatment. I know about the medical bed she needs. I know about the mountain of debt that threatens to crush you. Scarlett stared at the file, her name neatly typed on the tab. She felt exposed, vulnerable. Why? She whispered. Why would you do all of this? Alexander Blackwood leaned back in his chair, a long, deep sigh escaping him. Because, my dear girl, I am in a unique position. I have more money than I could spend in 100 lifetimes. It has brought me comfort, yes, but also a great deal of isolation and disillusionment. You, with your simple, unasked-for kindness, gave me a gift far more valuable than anything money can buy. You gave me hope. He leaned forward again, his pale blue eyes, the eyes of Arthur Harrison, locking onto hers. They were no longer weary, but clear and full of purpose. And now, he said, his voice ringing with conviction, I would like to give you a gift in return. I want to change your life, Scarlett, just as you have changed mine. The words hung in the ambulant air of the library, so immense, so reality-altering that Scarlett couldn't process them. Change your life? People said things like that in movies, in fairy tales. It didn't happen to waitresses from Queens who bought their clothes from thrift stores and whose biggest win of the week was finding a coupon for their mother's favorite brand of tea. I don't understand. She stammered, her mind a frantic scramble of disbelief and a wild, terrifying hope. Alexander Blackwood, the man who was and was not Mr. Harrison, smiled a genuine warm smile. It transformed his face, erasing some of the powerful, intimidating aura and revealing a glimpse of the lonely old man she had known. "It's quite simple, really," he said, tapping the folder with a perfectly manicured finger. "First, your mother. My personal physicians are some of the best in the world. They will be taking over her care, effective immediately. The experimental treatment she was denied, it will be administered, the specialized medical bed. It will be delivered and installed this afternoon. All of it. Every doctor's visit, every medication, every therapy will be taken care of. For the rest of her life." Scarlett's world tilted on its axis. The relentless, crushing weight that had been sitting on her chest for years suddenly lifted, leaving her lightheaded and breathless. Tears sprang to her eyes. Not the tears of despair she was so used to, but tears of profound, overwhelming relief. "But that's not all," he continued, his voice gentle but firm. "A young woman of your intelligence and character should not be spending her life serving lukewarm coffee to ungrateful people." He slid a second document across the desk. It was a letter of acceptance on the letterhead of New York University. "You once mentioned to Arthur Harrison that you dreamed of being a social worker, of helping people. I believe you would be an extraordinary one. I have arranged for a full scholarship to their top-ranked Master of Social Work program. Your tuition, your books, your living expenses, all of it is covered." Scarlett stared at the letter, her name printed in bold. NYU. It was a dream she had buried so deep, she had almost forgotten it existed. "And finally," Blackwood said, his tone becoming more businesslike, "a person cannot study and care for a loved one without resources. I have established a trust fund in your name. It will provide you with a substantial monthly income, enough to ensure that you and your mother live in comfort and security without a single financial worry ever again." He named a figure, a monthly amount, that was more than she earned in a year of double shifts. The number was so absurd, so astronomical, that it didn't even sound real. Scarlett could only shake her head, the tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "Why, this is too much. I can't accept this." "You can and you will," he stated, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Think of it not as charity, Scarlett, but as an investment. An investment in kindness. An investment in a future I now believe is worth building. You earned this, not with a grand gesture, but with 1,000 small ones. You earned it every time you brought me a glass of water with a straw, every time you cut my food, every time you spoke to me with respect and empathy. You passed a test you didn't even know you were taking." The sheer dizzying magnitude of it all was too much. The room began to spin. Alexander Blackwood, or one of his staff, must have anticipated this. The severe-looking woman in the grey uniform appeared silently at her side with a glass of water. The rest of the meeting was a blur. Lawyers were brought in, men in suits even more expensive than Blackwood's. Papers were signed, her hand trembling so violently she could barely hold the pen. She was given a new phone, a new bank card, and the keys to a car that was apparently waiting for her in the garage downstairs. It was all happening too fast, a tidal wave of fortune that threatened to drown her. When she finally stumbled out of 740 Park Avenue and back into the harsh light of day, the world looked different. The city noise seemed distant, the people on the streets like actors in a play. She felt utterly disconnected from the reality she had known just a few hours before. Her first call was to the diner. She spoke to Sal, her voice shaking. "Sal, it's Scarlett. I have to quit. I'm not coming back." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, followed by a gruff, "Yeah, whatever. Don't expect a good reference." The line went dead. It was a jarringly abrupt end to a chapter of her life that had defined her existence. Her next destination was home. As she pulled up to her run-down apartment building in a sleek, brand-new sedan, she barely knew how to operate. She saw it. A large, unmarked truck was parked outside, and two men in professional uniforms were maneuvering a state-of-the-art medical bed through the narrow entrance of her building. Alexander Blackwood was a man of his word. The reunion with her mother was a storm of emotions. Eleanor, seeing the bed, then seeing the look on her daughter's face, was bewildered. Scarlett tried to explain, stumbling over the words "Billionaire," "undercover," and "Mr. Harrison." It sounded like a fever dream, a plot from a soap opera. But as the day unfolded, the truth of it became undeniable. A nurse, a kind and professional woman named Maria, arrived to oversee Eleanor's care. A team of cleaners and organizers dispatched by Blackwood's estate manager descended on the apartment respectfully, asking for permission to pack their belongings. "Pack?" Eleanor asked, her voice weak. "Where are we going?" Scarlett hadn't even had time to process that part. A call from Blackwood's personal assistant had informed her that a new apartment had been arranged for them. A spacious ground-floor apartment in a modern, accessible building on the Upper West Side, overlooking the river. The move was a whirlwind. Within 48 hours, they were living in a beautiful, sun-filled apartment, filled with comfortable new furniture and adapted for Eleanor's needs. The old, cramped walk-up in Queens, with its ghosts of struggle and worry, felt like a distant memory from someone else's life. But the transition was not without its own turmoil. While the relief was immense, Scarlett felt a profound sense of dislocation. She would wake up in her plush new bed, the quiet of the apartment unsettling after years of city sirens, and for a moment she wouldn't know where she was. The money, the security, it was all wonderful, but it had stripped her of her identity. She had been Scarlett, the survivor, Scarlett, the fighter. Who was she now? The news of her sudden fortune, as it inevitably would, reached the daily grind. Brenda called, her voice full of genuine, tearful happiness, for her. "I always knew you were special, honey. You deserve this." Tiffany's reaction was predictably quite different. She didn't call Scarlett. Instead, she became the star of the diner's gossip mill. Scarlett heard through Brenda that Tiffany was telling everyone a wild, fabricated story. "She's a gold digger, that's what she is," Tiffany would proclaim to anyone who would listen. She must have found out who that old man was and played him, seducing a poor, confused old billionaire. "It's disgusting. She manipulated him." The words were a poisoned dart, finding their mark even from a distance. They tapped into Scarlett's own deepest insecurities about the situation. Had she been naive, or had Tiffany been right all along? Was her kindness just a tool she had unwittingly used? The thought was a bitter pill. A week after her life had been turned upside down, she received an invitation. It was for a charity gala hosted by the Blackwood Foundation. A personal handwritten note from Alexander was included. "It is time," it read, "for you to meet the world you are now a part of. And it is time for them to meet you. Courage." Scarlett stared at the elegant invitation, a fresh wave of anxiety washing over her. She could handle rude customers and mounting bills, but a world of tuxedos, evening gowns, and whispered judgments, that was a battle she had no idea how to fight. Her old life was gone, but she was beginning to realize that her new one, with all its glittering promises, would come with its own set of trials. The drama, it seemed, was far from over. The Blackwood Foundation Gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. For the occasion, a personal shopper arranged by Alexander's discreet assistant had helped Scarlett select a deep sapphire evening gown. It was elegant and understated, yet it felt like a costume. As she looked at her reflection in the mirror of her new spacious bedroom, she saw a stranger staring back. The dress was beautiful, the subtle makeup professionally applied, the simple jewelry sparkling at her throat. But the eyes were the same, filled with a familiar uncertainty. Her mother, looking healthier and more relaxed than she had in years, wheeled herself into the room, expertly maneuvering the new motorized chair. "Oh, Scarlett," Eleanor breathed, her eyes shining. "You look like a movie star." "I feel like an imposter," Scarlett confessed, her voice tight. "Nonsense." Eleanor said, her voice stronger than it had been in a long time. "You are the kindest person I know. That's not a costume. That's real. Now go. And for heaven's sake, try to have some fun." Alexander had sent a car for her. Arriving at the Met, she was plunged into a dazzling, overwhelming world. A river of black-tie guests flowed up the grand staircase. The air hummed with polite laughter, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the low thrum of immense wealth and power. Names she recognized from Forbes and the Wall Street Journal floated past her ears. She saw Alexander standing near the entrance to the main hall, a commanding presence even in a room full of titans. He was talking to a senator and a well-known philanthropist. When he saw Scarlett, he excused himself and walked towards her, his smile genuine. "Scarlett, you look magnificent," he said, offering her his arm. "Breathe. You belong here as much as anyone." His presence was a comfort, an anchor in the swirling sea of high society. He began to introduce her to people, his introductions, simple but laden with unspoken meaning. "This is my dear friend, Scarlett O'Connell, a woman of remarkable character." The reactions were a study in polite curiosity. People would smile, shake her hand, their eyes quickly scanning her, trying to place her to understand her connection to the reclusive billionaire. She felt like an exotic specimen on display. Then she saw her. Across the room, schmoozing with a group of slick-looking men, was Tiffany. Scarlett froze. What was she doing here? Tiffany looked completely in her element, poured into a garish, sequined red dress, a champagne flute held aloft like a trophy. She was laughing, a loud, artificial sound that grated on Scarlett's nerves even from a distance. Alexander followed her gaze. His expression hardened. "Ah, Miss Dubois," he said, his voice laced with ice. "I was not aware she would be in attendance." "Her name is Tiffany," Scarlett said numbly. "She worked at the diner with me." "I am aware," Alexander said, his tone clipped. "She is here as the guest of a Mr. Peterson, a junior executive in one of my subsidiary companies. It seems Miss Dubois is as ambitious as she is unpleasant." Just then Tiffany spotted them. Her eyes widened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of pure shock before her expression morphed into a smirk. Excusing herself from her group, she sashayed towards them, her hips swaying with practiced confidence. "Well, well, well," Tiffany purred, her eyes raking over Scarlett's dress with ill-disguised envy. "Scarlett O'Connell, look at you, cleaning up nicely." She then turned her full, dazzling smile on Alexander. "Mr. Blackwood, it is an absolute honor. I'm Tiffany Dubois. I'm a huge admirer of your work." "Miss Dubois," Alexander said, his voice flat and cold. He did not extend his hand. Tiffany was undeterred. "I was just telling my friends what a small world it is. I used to work with Scarlett. It was so sweet watching her take care of all the needy customers. She always had a soft spot for the down-and-out types. She looked at Alexander a sly, insinuating glance. It really paid off for her in the end, didn't it? The implication was clear, a venomous dart aimed at both Scarlett and Alexander. She was painting Scarlett as a calculating predator, and Alexander as a senile old fool who had been taken in. Scarlett felt a hot flush of anger. The old Scarlett would have shrunk away, intimidated. But something had changed. Maybe it was the dress. Maybe it was the security of knowing her mother was safe. Or maybe it was just the culmination of a lifetime of being pushed around. "It's interesting, Tiffany," Scarlett said, her voice clear and steady, surprising even herself. "What I remember is you calling Mr. Harrison Old Man Hemlock. I remember you complaining about his dollar tips. I remember you telling me I was a fool for showing him basic human decency. You're right about one thing. It did pay off. Just not for the person who was only ever interested in the payoff." Tiffany's smile faltered. A flash of fury crossed her face. "You have some nerve," she hissed, her voice low. Alexander stepped forward, slightly a subtle but unmistakable movement of protection. "Miss Dubois," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl that could have frozen lava. "My friendship with Miss O'Connell is a private matter. However, I will say this. Character is not determined by how one treats their equals or their superiors, but by how one treats those they perceive to be beneath them. Scarlett treated a poor, disabled old man with kindness and dignity. You treated him with contempt. That is the only difference that matters." He paused, letting his words hang in the air. "Now, if you'll excuse us. We have friends to greet." With a final dismissive glance, he guided Scarlett away, leaving Tiffany standing alone, her face a mask of stunned fury and humiliation. The exchange had been brief, but Scarlett felt a surge of adrenaline. She had stood her ground. She had spoken her truth. As they walked towards the terrace overlooking the park, Scarlett's hands were still shaking. "Thank you," she said to Alexander. "You did not need my help," he replied, looking at her with a new level of respect. "You handled that with admirable strength." But the encounter had planted a seed of unease. Tiffany was a loose cannon, her ambition matched only by her ruthlessness. And Scarlett knew, with a sinking certainty, that Tiffany would not let this go. The public humiliation would only fuel her desire for revenge. The rest of the gala passed in a dreamlike state. She met doctors who would be treating her mother, educators who would be her professors at NYU. They were all kind, welcoming, but Scarlett couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The confrontation with Tiffany had reminded her of where she came from and how fragile her new position felt. Later that week, the first attack came. It was subtle, a blind item in a sleazy online gossip column, but the details were unmistakable. What reclusive, elderly billionaire has recently taken up with a much younger companion of questionable background, sources say? The former waitress played a long con, preying on the old man's loneliness to secure a multi-million-dollar payday. Looks like some people will do anything for a Park Avenue address. It was Tiffany's handiwork, Scarlett was sure of it. The words were a public branding painting her as a manipulative gold digger. The comments section was a cesspool of vitriol. Her new life, which had felt like a miracle, was now tainted by scandal. Alexander was furious. His legal team immediately moved to have the article taken down, but the damage was done. The story was out there, a whisper of doubt that would follow her. A few days later, a more direct assault arrived. It was a formal-looking letter sent by a law firm. Scarlett's blood ran cold as she read it. The letter was from a man named Marcus Thorne, claiming to be Alexander Blackwood's estranged nephew. The letter alleged that Alexander was not of sound mind, that he was being unduly influenced by a designing and manipulative individual, Scarlett. It stated Thorne's intention to petition the court for conservatorship over Alexander's estate to protect him from exploitation. The letter was a declaration of war, and Scarlett knew instinctively who had put the weapon in the nephew's hand. Tiffany, in her quest for revenge, had found a greedy, willing accomplice. She sat in her beautiful sunlit apartment, the legal letter trembling in her hand. The gilded cage had sprung its trap. Her reward had not been an ending, but a beginning. A beginning of a new, far more public and vicious battle than she had ever imagined. She was no longer fighting for survival. She was fighting for her reputation, her integrity, and for the man who had saved her, who was now, because of her, in danger of losing everything. This wasn't just a story about a waitress and a billionaire. It was a testament to the unseen battles we all fight, and the profound truth that our true wealth is not measured in dollars, but in our capacity for compassion. Scarlett's journey from the sticky floors of a diner to the marble halls of high society reminds us that the smallest acts of kindness can echo in the most unexpected ways, creating ripples that can either calm a troubled soul or stir up a tempest of greed and jealousy. Her story is a powerful lesson. Character is the one thing money can't buy, and the one thing that in the end is truly priceless. If Scarlett's incredible story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up to show your support. Don't forget to share it with your friends and family to spread this message of hope and kindness. And for more real-life dramas that will inspire and captivate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next.